Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. Upbeat, aspirational music swells, with quick cuts of a young Eleanor, her hair tied back in a messy bun, working late into the night at a cluttered desk covered in ledgers and coffee mugs. The screen flashes to Mark, her boyfriend, shaking hands in a sleek office, basking in applause. A voiceover sets the stage. She built his empire from the shadows, but shadows hide secrets. Eleanor Harper wasn't just Mark Thompson's girlfriend. She was the backbone of his dreams, the unseen architect of Innovate Tech, a tech startup poised to revolutionize data analytics. In their cramped one-bedroom apartment in 2015, Eleanor was the one who made it all possible. While Mark, with his boyish charm and endless ideas, pitched to investors and networked at tech meetups, Eleanor was hunched over spreadsheets, her fingers flying across a second-hand laptop. She secured their first angel investor by cold calling for weeks, her voice steady despite the rejections. She balanced their books with surgical precision, stretching every dollar to keep their dream alive. "Mark, we're $200 short for the server payment," Eleanor said one evening, her eyes bloodshot from a 14-hour day. The apartment smelled of instant coffee and takeout containers. "Don't worry, Elle," Mark replied, barely looking up from his phone, where he was scrolling through industry blogs. "You always figure it out. You're my rock." His words warmed her, but they also carried an unspoken weight. She was his rock, his foundation, but it came at a cost. Eleanor skipped meals to save money, worked freelance bookkeeping gigs to fund their prototype, and sacrificed sleep to refine pitch decks. Her love for Mark fueled her relentless drive. She believed in his vision, their vision, of a future where Innovate Tech would change the world, and they'd build a life together. Their tiny apartment was a war room of ambition. Post-it notes littered the walls with product ideas, timelines, and reminders. Eleanor's quiet determination held it all together. One night, as she finalized a pitch for a venture capital firm, Mark burst in, his eyes alight. "Elle, they're in. Vantage Capital's giving us $500,000. He swept her into a hug, spinning her around the cramped living room. "We did it," she laughed, her exhaustion melting away in his arms. "This is just the start, Mark. You're incredible," he said, kissing her forehead. "I couldn't do this without you." But even in that moment of triumph, a tiny seed of unease took root. Mark's focus was already drifting to the next big meeting, the next big name. Eleanor pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to the grind of startup life. She didn't know that the foundation she was pouring her heart into would soon crack, not from market pressures, but from a betrayal so deep it would shatter her world. The music shifts to a tense, pulsating beat. Quick cuts show Mark upgrading his wardrobe, shiny watches, tailored suits, while Eleanor fades into the background, still in her practical sweaters. A glamorous woman, Serena, appears in a sleek office, her smile calculated. Voiceover, success changes people, and not always for the better. By 2017, Innovate Tech was a rising star in Silicon Valley. The $500,000 investment had snowballed into millions, and Mark was no longer the scrappy dreamer in thrift store sneakers. He was a CEO, his name splashed across tech blogs, his face on the cover of TechTrend. Eleanor, meanwhile, remained in the shadows, managing operations and crunching numbers while Mark soaked up the spotlight. The changes were subtle at first. Mark started wearing tailored suits, his wrist adorned with a Rolex that cost more than their first car. His phone, once a shared tool for work, was now perpetually face down, buzzing with notifications he didn't share. Eleanor noticed the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his jackets, something floral, expensive, nothing like her drugstore lavender spray. "New cologne?" she asked one evening, trying to keep her tone light as she folded his laundry. Mark shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Just something from a client lunch. You know how it is." She didn't, but she nodded, swallowing the unease. Mark was busier now, his days filled with investor dinners and late-night strategy sessions. He'd come home later each week, his excuses wrapped in corporate jargon. "Elle, I've got to meet with the board tomorrow," he said one night, slipping into bed after midnight. "They're pushing for a new product launch. It's crazy. Want me to go over the financials?" she offered, her voice soft but hopeful. "Nah, you've got enough on your plate," he said, already turning away. The warmth that once defined their relationship was cooling. Eleanor tried to bridge the gap, planning dinners, leaving notes in his briefcase. But Mark's responses grew shorter, his attention elsewhere. At a company party, she spotted a new face, Serena Caldwell, Innovateca's PR consultant. Serena was all polish, blonde hair cascading in perfect waves, her designer dress hugging her curves. She moved through the room like she owned it, her laughter drawing eyes. Mark's eyes lingered longest. "Mark, who's that?" Eleanor asked, nodding toward Serena as they stood by the bar. "Oh, just Serena. She's handling our media push," he said, his tone too casual. "She's good. Connected." Eleanor smiled tightly, her instincts prickling. Serena's gaze flicked toward them, her lips curving in a way that felt less like a greeting and more like a challenge. As the night wore on, Eleanor watched Mark gravitate toward Serena, their heads bent close in conversation. It wasn't just business. It was something else, something that made Eleanor's stomach twist. A shot of Serena's hand brushing Mark's arm, their laughter echoing. Eleanor stands alone, clutching a glass, her face a mask of doubt. Voiceover, the chill of distance was just the beginning, the real storm was coming. Melancholy piano notes play softly. Shots of Eleanor alone in their apartment, cooking a meal for two, checking her phone. A text from Mark reads, "Working late again." The screen cuts to Mark and Serena at a candlelit dinner, laughing. Voiceover, she waited for him, but he was already gone. By 2018, Eleanor felt like a ghost haunting her own life. Their apartment, once a hub of shared dreams, was now a museum of absence. Mark was rarely home, his presence reduced to a trail of coffee cups and crumpled receipts. Eleanor kept the home fires burning, cooking his favorite lasagna, hoping to recapture the spark of their early days. But the meals went cold, untouched, as Mark texted excuses. Board meeting ran late. "Don't wait up." One evening, she sat at the dining table, the lasagna congealing in its dish. Her phone buzzed with another vague message, "Caught up with a client thing. Be home soon." She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. "Mark, this isn't sustainable," she typed, then deleted it. Instead, she sent, "Okay, love you." No response came. The silence of the apartment was deafening. She wandered to the living room, picking up a framed photo from their first year together. Mark grinning, his arm around her at a tech conference. Her eyes stung. Where had that man gone? She tried confronting him gently. One rare morning when he was home, she poured them coffee and sat across from him. "Mark, we barely talk anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "I feel like I'm losing you." He sighed, rubbing his temples. It's just the business. You know how it is. We're scaling fast. I can't be everywhere at once." "But you're not here," she pressed, her voice breaking. "I'm trying so hard, Mark. I just want us to be us again." He looked at her, but his eyes were distant, like he was already halfway out the door. "I hear you, okay? I'll try." He didn't. The late nights grew later, the excuses flimsier. Eleanor found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a $300 dinner at the Onyx, a restaurant he'd promised to take her to for their anniversary. The date on the receipt wasn't their anniversary. Her heart sank, but she clung to denial, telling herself it was a client dinner. She had to believe that. The alternative was too painful. A shot of Eleanor staring at the receipt, her hands shaking. Voiceover, she held on to hope, but hope was about to shatter. A dramatic music swell, sharp and jarring. Slow motion shot of a coffee cup slipping from Eleanor's hands, shattering on the floor. The screen cuts to Mark and Serena through a restaurant window, their laughter intimate. Eleanor's face is a mask of shock. Voiceover, one moment can break everything you thought you knew. It was a Tuesday evening in late 2018, a chilly autumn night. Eleanor was driving home from a freelance bookkeeping job, her mind heavy with worry. She'd been trying to call Mark, but his phone went straight to voicemail. On a whim, she took a detour past the Onyx, the restaurant from the receipt. She told herself it was nothing, just a need to stretch her legs. Then she saw his car. Parked right outside, unmistakable with its custom license plate, Innov 8. Her heart thudded, a mix of dread and curiosity pulling her closer. She parked across the street, her breath fogging the window. Through the ornate glass of the onyx, she saw him, Mark, leaning across a candlelit table, his face lit with a smile she hadn't seen in months. Across from him was Serena, her blonde hair catching the light, her hand resting just a little too close to his. Eleanor's world tilted. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. This wasn't a client dinner. The way Mark's hand brushed Serena's arm, the way he laughed with an ease he'd never shown at home, it was intimate, personal. It was betrayal. She sat frozen, her mind replaying every missed call, every late night. How long had this been going on? Had she been blind, or had he been that good at hiding it? She wanted to storm in, to scream, to demand answers. But her body wouldn't move. Instead, she watched, her heart splintering with every shared glance between them. The music crescendos, a shot of Eleanor's tear-streaked face reflecting in the car window, juxtaposed with Mark and Serena's laughter. She saw the truth, but the real pain was yet to come. Harsh, sterile lighting in a sleek office. Close-up on divorce papers sliding across a desk. Mark's face is cold, detached. Eleanor's hand trembles as she signs. The sound of the pen scratching is deafening. Voiceover, he didn't fight for her, he erased her. Eleanor couldn't keep silent. The next morning, she waited for Mark in their apartment. The image of him with Serena burned into her mind. When he walked in, his tie loosened, his face flushed from another late meeting, she didn't hold back. "Mark, I saw you," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "At the Onyx. With Serena." He froze, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, she hoped he'd deny it, beg for forgiveness, fight for them. Instead, he sighed, as if annoyed by an inconvenience. "Eleanor, let's not do this," he said, his voice flat. He walked to his briefcase, pulled out a stack of papers, and set them on the counter. Divorce papers. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "It's over, Elle," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I'm moving on. This is best for both of us." "Best for us," she choked out, tears spilling over. "I gave you everything, Mark. I built Innovate Tech with you. How can you just throw me away?" He shrugged, his expression chillingly detached. "You're being dramatic. Things change. People change. Sign the papers, and let's move on. No apology. No remorse. Just a cold, calculated end." Eleanor's hands shook as she picked up the pen. She wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, but her pride wouldn't let her beg. She signed, each stroke of the pen feeling like a cut to her soul. Mark took the papers and left without another word. Eleanor stood in the empty apartment, the silence heavier than ever. She wasn't just losing a marriage, she was losing the life she'd poured her heart into. The woman who had built an empire was now invisible, discarded, her existence erased with a single signature. The music fades to a single, haunting note. A shot of Eleanor standing alone, the signed papers on the counter. The door slams shut as Mark leaves. She lost everything, but rock bottom was where her true story would begin. Muted colors wash over the screen, a slow pan of a sparse, dimly lit apartment. Eleanor sits alone at a small table, eating instant noodles. A framed photo of her and Mark in happier times is placed face down. The sound of her lonely footsteps echoes. Voiceover, she was alone, but the silence hid a spark waiting to ignite. Eleanor's new reality was a far cry from the vibrant apartment she'd shared with Mark. The divorce had left her with little more than a few boxes of belongings and a one-room rental in a run-down part of town. The walls were thin, the faucet dripped, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. Each night, she lay awake, the creak of the cheap mattress amplifying the hollowness in her chest. The financial strain was crushing, her savings were gone, poured into Innovate Tech, and Mark's lawyers had ensured she walked away with next to nothing. She survived on instant noodles and thrift store clothes, her days filled with temp jobs that barely covered rent. One evening, she sat at her wobbly table, staring at a bowl of lukewarm ramen. Her phone, silent for days, mocked her isolation. She picked up the framed photo of her and Mark from their first Innovate Tech pitch, their smiles radiant with hope. "Why did I believe in you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. She set the frame face down, unable to bear the memory. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of a distant neighbor's TV. Eleanor replayed every moment of their marriage, searching for the exact point where it all went wrong. Had it been her fault? Had she been too focused on the business, too trusting? The questions gnawed at her, each one a fresh wound. She called her best friend, Lila, one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lila, I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted, clutching the phone. "I gave him everything, and now I'm nothing." "You're not nothing, Elle," Lila said firmly. "You're the woman who built a company from scratch. You're still you." "He's the one who lost everything." Eleanor wanted to believe her, but the weight of betrayal and poverty felt like chains. She hung up, staring at the ceiling, the drip of the faucet counting out her loneliness. Yet, in that desolate moment, a faint ember of defiance flickered. She wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The music shifts to a determined, quietly powerful beat. A close-up of Eleanor's reflection in a cracked mirror, her eyes hardening with resolve. She smooths out her crumpled divorce papers, her hands steady. Voiceover. She was done crying. It was time to rise. One gray morning in early 2019, Eleanor caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was gaunt, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. She barely recognized the woman staring back, defeated, diminished. But as she traced the lines of her tired face, something snapped. Not despair, but a quiet, burning rage. She wasn't this broken shell. She was the woman who'd secured Innovate Tech's first million, who'd balanced budgets on pennies, who'd loved fiercely and fought harder. "This is not my ending," she said aloud, her voice steady for the first time in months. She grabbed the divorce papers from a drawer, their edges worn from her obsessive rereading. Smoothing them out, she saw not just the end of her marriage, but a challenge. Mark had discarded her, but she would rebuild, stronger, smarter, on her own terms. She started small. She scoured free online courses, devouring lessons on business strategy and tech trends. She took a second job as a cashier, saving every cent for a better laptop. At night, she attended free community seminars, scribbling notes with a ferocity that surprised even her. One evening, at a local library's Women in Business talk, she met a mentor, Clara, a retired CFO with a no-nonsense demeanor. Over coffee, Eleanor poured out her story, her voice raw but determined. "You built his empire, Eleanor," Clara said, her eyes sharp. "What's stopping you from building your own?" "I don't know where to start," Eleanor admitted. "I've got no money, no network. Just me." Clara leaned forward. "That's enough. You've got grit. Start small, but start. The world doesn't owe you a comeback, it's yours to take." Those words lit a fire. Eleanor began pitching freelance consulting gigs, leveraging her Innovate Tech experience. Rejections stung, but each one fueled her resolve. She was no longer Mark's shadow, she was Eleanor Harper, and she was clawing her way back. Flashy, superficial visuals burst onto the screen. Mark and Serena at designer stores, clinking champagne glasses at lavish parties. Quick cuts reveal Serena's bored expression, Mark's strained smile. A tense argument behind closed doors. Voiceover, he thought he'd won, but every prize has a price. While Eleanor fought to rebuild, Mark was living his fantasy, or so he thought. With Serena on his arm, he'd traded their modest apartment for a penthouse overlooking the city. Innovate Tech's success had made him a darling of the tech world, his face plastered on billboards and magazine covers. Serena, with her polished charm, was the perfect accessory, turning heads at every gala. But the shine was fading. Serena's demands were relentless. "Mark, we need the new Hermes bag," she'd say, her voice sweet but edged with expectation. "It's an investment in our image." "Our image?" Mark snapped one evening, his patience fraying as he stared at a $20,000 credit card bill. "This is my money, Serena." "Your money?" She raised an eyebrow, her smile cold. "You mean our money, darling. I'm the reason you're taken seriously now." Their penthouse, with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, felt like a golden cage. Serena planned extravagant trips, Paris, Dubai, Maldives, each one draining Mark's accounts. At first, he'd reveled in the luxury, but the cracks were showing. Serena's affection was transactional, her laughter reserved for when he opened his wallet. At parties, she flirted openly with other CEOs, her eyes scanning for the next big opportunity. "Serena, you're with me," Mark said sharply one night, pulling her aside at a charity gala. She rolled her eyes. Relax, Mark. Networking is part of the game. You want Innovate Tech to stay on top, don't you? But Mark felt the ground shifting. His focus was split between keeping Serena happy and running a company that was starting to wobble without Eleanor's meticulous oversight. Late at night, alone in his office, he'd stare at old spreadsheets, remembering Eleanor's knack for spotting errors he'd missed. He pushed the thoughts away, but they lingered like ghosts. A shot of Mark alone in his penthouse, staring at a photo of him and Serena, his face etched with doubt. Voiceover, his dream life was a trap, and the real cost was coming. The music grows darker, more urgent. Shots of Serena checking her phone while Mark talks, her eyes cold. A heated argument in a sleek office, papers scattered. Mark looks exhausted, his empire crumbling. Voiceover, the trophy wasn't what it seemed, and neither was his success. By mid-2019, Mark's life was unraveling. Serena was no Eleanor. Where Eleanor had been a partner, working tirelessly for their shared dream, Serena was a vortex of entitlement. She had no interest in Innovate Tech's operations, only its profits. "Why are you always so stressed?" she'd complain, lounging on their leather sofa, scrolling through her phone. "Just hire someone to fix it." Fix it? Mark exploded one evening, slamming his laptop shut. "This is my company, Serena. It's not a game." "Then maybe you're not cut out for it," she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "I didn't sign up for this whining." Her words cut deeper than he'd admit. Serena's public flirtations were becoming blatant. She'd laugh too loudly with rival CEOs, linger too long at their tables. At a tech conference, Mark overheard her joking with a venture capitalist. "Mark's fun, but he's no visionary. You, on the other hand." The betrayal stung, but it was only part of the problem. Innovate Tech was hemorrhaging money. Without Eleanor's financial acumen, expenses had spiraled. Key clients were jumping ship, frustrated by delayed projects and Mark's distracted leadership. Board meetings were tense, with investors questioning his decisions. "Mark, we're losing ground," one board member said sharply. "What's going on? You used to have this under control." He didn't have an answer. Late at night, he'd pour a whiskey and stare at the city skyline, wondering how it had come to this. Serena's spending was a black hole, and her loyalty was as fleeting as the champagne she demanded. The trophy he'd chased was tarnishing, revealing a hollow core. The music slows, a shot of Mark alone in his office, a headline flashing, "Innovate Tech faces uncertain future." Voiceover. His world was crumbling, but hers was about to ignite. Uplifting, inspiring music swells. Shots of Eleanor at a small business seminar, looking out of place but determined. Jonathan, a sharply dressed man with kind eyes, makes eye contact. Their handshake lingers. Voiceover. Sometimes, a single moment changes everything. Eleanor's days were grueling, but her resolve was ironclad. She worked 2 jobs, cashier by day, freelance consultant by night, and attended every free seminar she could find. One evening, at a nondescript networking mixer in a community center, she felt like an imposter among the polished entrepreneurs. Her thrift store blazer and scuffed shoes stood out against their designer suits. But she was there, notebook in hand, determined to learn. That's when she met Jonathan Blake. He wasn't flashy, no Rolex, no entourage, just a quiet man in his early 40s with a calm authority. He was a guest speaker, a tech titan who'd built Blake Industries into a billion-dollar empire. During the Q&A, Eleanor asked a question about scaling startups, her voice steady despite her nerves. Jonathan's eyes met hers, and he paused, impressed. "That's a sharp question," he said, smiling. "Most people overlook cash flow at that stage. You've got a good head for this." After the talk, he approached her. "I'm Jonathan," he said, extending a hand. "You're not just here to take notes, are you?" Eleanor laughed, a little self-conscious. "Eleanor Harper. I'm trying to start over." They talked for an hour, the room emptying around them. Jonathan didn't pry, but his questions were incisive, drawing out her Innovate Tech experience. "You sound like someone who's run a company, not just supported one," he said, his tone genuine. "I was behind the scenes," she said, her voice catching. It didn't end well. He nodded, no judgment in his eyes. The best stories start where things fall apart. You've got something special, Eleanor. Don't let it stay buried. As they parted, he handed her his card. My team's always looking for sharp minds. Send me your resume. Eleanor walked home, the card burning a hole in her pocket. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not as Mark's ex, but as herself. A shot of Eleanor clutching Jonathan's card, her face alight with hope. Voiceover, a new door was opening, and it would lead her to heights she never imagined. Uplifting music with a steady, inspiring beat. Shots of Jonathan in a sleek office, looking thoughtful. Eleanor in an interview, nervous but composed, her hands clasped tightly. A close-up of Jonathan extending a hand with a genuine smile. A text from Eleanor to Lila, "OMG, I got it." Voiceover, one chance was all she needed, and she was about to seize it. Eleanor Harper stood at the precipice of a new beginning. Her chance encounter with Jonathan Blake at the networking mixer had sparked something she hadn't felt in years: hope. His business card had become her talisman, tucked into her wallet as she prepared for the opportunity of a lifetime. Jonathan, the founder of Blake Industries, had invited her to interview for a role in his innovation division. Not a pity hire, but a position that demanded real skill. The interview process was grueling. Eleanor faced 3 rounds, each more intense than the last. She sat across from executives in a glass-walled conference room, her thrift store blazer feeling out of place among their tailored suits. But her mind was sharp, her answers precise, drawing on her years at Innovate Tech. "Why should we hire you?" one interviewer asked, her tone skeptical. Eleanor took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Because I've built something from nothing before. I know what it takes to turn a vision into reality. Every spreadsheet, every late night, every tough call. I'm not here for a job, I'm here to make a difference." Jonathan, sitting at the head of the table, leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. After the final round, he called her personally. "Eleanor, you impressed us," he said, his voice warm but professional. "We'd like you to join the team as a strategy lead. It's a big role, but I think you're ready for it. What do you say?" Eleanor's heart pounded. "I'm in," she said, her voice catching. "Thank you, Jonathan. I won't let you down." She hung up, her hands trembling as she texted Lila, "OMG, I got it." The reply came instantly, "That's my girl. Time to show the world what you're made of." The job wasn't just a paycheck, it was a lifeline. Eleanor moved into a slightly better apartment, traded her instant noodles for fresh groceries, and felt a spark of her old self returning. Under Jonathan's mentorship, she was stepping into a world where her talents were finally seen, not as Mark's shadow, but as a force in her own right. The music swells, a montage of Eleanor signing her contract, unpacking in a brighter apartment, and smiling at her reflection. Voiceover, she was back, and her rise was just beginning. A vibrant montage of Eleanor thriving, collaborating in a bustling office, giving confident presentations, her wardrobe evolving from thrift store finds to elegant blouses. Her smile grows genuine, radiant. Voiceover, from the ashes, she became unstoppable. At Blake Industries, Eleanor blossomed. The innovation division was a hive of creativity, and Jonathan's leadership fostered an environment where ideas were king. He saw her potential and pushed her to excel. "You're not just here to execute, Eleanor," he told her during a late-night strategy session. "You're here to lead. Own it." She did. Eleanor dove into projects with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She led a team developing a new data analytics platform, her insights cutting through corporate jargon like a knife. Her colleagues, initially skeptical of the quiet newcomer, soon respected her sharp mind and relentless work ethic. One afternoon, during a pitch to a major client, Eleanor took the lead. "Our platform doesn't just process data," she said, her voice commanding the room. "It predicts trends before they happen. Let me show you how." The client, a Fortune 500 CEO, nodded, impressed. After the meeting, Jonathan pulled her aside. "You were phenomenal in there," he said, his smile genuine. "You're not just fitting in, Eleanor, you're setting the pace." Her transformation wasn't just professional. Eleanor's confidence seeped into her appearance. She traded her worn sneakers for sleek heels, her thrift store blazers for tailored dresses. The haunted look in her eyes faded, replaced by a spark of joy. She wasn't just rebuilding, she was unveiling a version of herself she'd never known, a woman who was powerful, elegant, and unapologetically herself. One evening, over coffee with Lila, Eleanor laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "I feel like me again," she said, her eyes bright. "No, better than me. Like I'm finally free." Lila grinned. "You're not just free, Elle. You're a damn queen." The music soars, a shot of Eleanor walking confidently through Blake Industries' lobby, heads turning. Voiceover, she was rising, but her past was about to catch up. Dark, brooding music. Shots of Mark alone in his office, papers strewn across his desk. A headline flashes, "Innovate Tech Faces Financial Woes." Serena storms out with designer luggage, her voice sharp. Voiceover, he chased glitter and lost gold. While Eleanor soared, Mark Thompson was plummeting. Innovate Tech, once a tech darling, was crumbling under his distracted leadership. Without Eleanor's meticulous oversight, budgets ballooned and projects stalled. Key clients defected, and investors grew restless. Board meetings turned hostile, with one director slamming his fist on the table. "Mark, what the hell is going on?" he demanded. "You're bleeding money, and our stock's tanking." Mark rubbed his temples, his Rolex glinting mockingly. "We're restructuring," he mumbled, but the excuse rang hollow. His personal life was no better. Serena, his trophy, had grown bored. Her affection had always been tied to his wallet, and as Innovate Tech faltered, so did her loyalty. She spent more time at exclusive clubs, flirting with wealthier men, leaving Mark to drown in his insecurities. One night, after another failed board meeting, Mark confronted her in their penthouse. "Serena, where were you? I needed you at the gala tonight." She laughed, tossing her hair. "Oh, Mark, please. I was with people who actually matter. You're not the big shot you used to be." Her words were a gut punch. The next morning, he woke to find her packing. "I'm done," she said, zipping a Louis Vuitton suitcase. "I've got a better offer." "Who?" Mark demanded, his voice breaking. "Does it matter?" she smirked, walking out without a backward glance. Serena took half his remaining fortune in a brutal settlement, leaving Mark with a failing company and a hollow penthouse. He poured whiskey, staring at old photos of Innovate Tech's early days, Eleanor's spreadsheets, her handwriting on post-it notes. The regret was a slow poison, seeping into his bones. The music grows ominous, a shot of Mark alone, a headline reading, "Innovate Tech Nears Bankruptcy." Voiceover, he was falling, and she was about to shine brighter than ever. Bright, energetic music. News anchors discuss Blake Industries' rising star. Online articles flash with Eleanor's photo, her smile confident. Mark, haggard, stares at a headline, "Eleanor Harper, the brain behind Blake's new success." Voiceover, her name was everywhere, and it haunted him. By 2020, Eleanor's star was rising. Her work at Blake Industries was making waves. Her data analytics platform had secured a $50 million contract, earning her a feature in TechTrend as the strategist to watch. Social media buzzed with her name, and industry insiders whispered about the quiet genius at Jonathan's side. One morning, in a coffee shop, Eleanor overheard two tech bros discussing her. "That Harper woman at Blake Industries? She's killing it," one said. "Heard she came out of nowhere." She smiled into her coffee, a quiet pride warming her. The world was finally seeing her, not as Mark's ex, but as Eleanor Harper, a force to be reckoned with. Across town, Mark couldn't escape her name. He flipped through a trade magazine, his stomach dropping at her photo, poised, radiant, next to Jonathan Blake. The headline read, "Eleanor Harper redefines innovation at Blake Industries." Each word was a dagger, a reminder of what he'd thrown away. He called an old colleague, desperate for context. "Eleanor's at Blake Industries?" he asked, his voice tight. "Yeah," the colleague said. "She's their secret weapon. Word is, she's running circles around everyone." "You didn't know." Mark hung up, his hands shaking. He'd always known Eleanor was smart, but he'd never imagined her like this, thriving, celebrated, without him. The regret was suffocating, a constant ache that no whiskey could dull. The music intensifies, a shot of Mark staring at Eleanor's photo, his face a mask of regret. Voiceover, her success was undeniable, and he was about to see it up close. High energy, sophisticated music. A glamorous gala, chandeliers sparkling. Mark, disheveled in a borrowed suit, looks lost in the crowd. Eleanor enters, radiant on Jonathan's arm, her dress shimmering. Mark's jaw drops. Voiceover, one moment would change everything, again. The annual Tech Innovators Gala was the event of the year, and Mark, despite his company's struggles, had wrangled an invitation, hoping to salvage connections. He stood awkwardly among the elite, his suit ill-fitting, his confidence eroded. The room buzzed with wealth and ambition, but he felt like an outsider. Then the crowd parted, and Eleanor entered. She was breathtaking, her emerald gown catching the light, her posture regal. On her arm was Jonathan Blake, his presence commanding yet warm. Eleanor's smile was genuine, her eyes sparkling with a joy Mark had never given her. She moved through the room like she belonged, shaking hands, laughing with industry titans. Mark froze, his breath catching. This wasn't the Eleanor he'd known, the quiet, selfless woman who'd stayed in the shadows. This was a queen, radiant and powerful. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and hers held no anger, only indifference, a look that cut deeper than any words. Mark, a former colleague approached, oblivious to his turmoil. You see Eleanor? She's the talk of the night. Blake's lucky to have her. Mark nodded, unable to speak. He watched her glide across the room, Jonathan's hand on her back, their ease speaking of a bond far deeper than business. The ache in his chest was unbearable, a mix of awe, regret, and the crushing realization of what he'd lost. The music swells dramatically, a shot of Eleanor laughing with Jonathan, unaware of Mark's gaze. His face is a portrait of devastation. Voiceover, she was untouchable, and his regret was just beginning. Omantic lighting bathes an upscale restaurant. Eleanor and Jonathan laugh softly across a candlelit table, their hands brushing. Across the room, Mark sits alone, his face grim. The camera zooms in on Eleanor's left hand, resting on the table. Voiceover, one night, one glance, would change it all, again. It was a quiet evening in late 2020, and Eleanor was thriving. Her role at Blake Industries had elevated her to new heights, and her bond with Jonathan Blake had deepened beyond mentorship. Their late-night strategy sessions had evolved into dinners, their conversations weaving effortlessly between business and personal dreams. Tonight, they sat at a corner table in La Lumiere, an intimate restaurant known for its exclusivity. Eleanor wore a sleek black dress, her confidence radiating, her laughter genuine as Jonathan shared a story about his first failed startup. "You're telling me you bombed a pitch?" she teased, her eyes sparkling. "Mr. Billionaire Blake." Jonathan chuckled, his gaze warm. "Oh, I was a mess. But failure's a great teacher. You know that better than anyone." Their hands brushed on the table, a moment of quiet connection. Across the room, Mark Thompson sat alone, nursing a whiskey. He'd come to La Lumiere to escape his crumbling world, but fate had other plans. His eyes caught Eleanor's profile, and his heart stopped. She was radiant, unrecognizable from the woman he'd discarded. The man with her, Jonathan Blake, a titan he could never rival, looked at her with a tenderness Mark had never offered. Mark's gaze lingered on Eleanor's left hand, resting casually on the table. No ring yet, but the way Jonathan's eyes followed her every move told a story. A premonition gripped Mark, cold and heavy. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The sight of her happiness, her freedom, was a mirror to his own failures. "Another drink, sir?" the waiter asked, snapping Mark out of his trance. "No," he muttered, his voice hollow. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. He was drowning in the wreckage of his choices, and Eleanor's light only made the darkness deeper. A shot of Mark's clenched fist, his eyes fixed on Eleanor and Jonathan. Voiceover. He saw her happiness, and it was about to blind him. A dramatic swell of music, slow-motion shot of Jonathan dropping to one knee. Eleanor's gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. A dazzling diamond ring sparkles under the restaurant's lights. Mark's face contorts in agony. Voiceover. One question would rewrite her story, and end his. The air in La Lumiere seemed to still as Jonathan pushed back his chair. Eleanor tilted her head, curious, until he sank to one knee, a velvet box in his hand. The restaurant's chatter faded, all eyes turning to them. Mark, across the room, froze, his glass halfway to his lips. "Eleanor Harper," Jonathan began, his voice clear and resonant, "you've changed my life, not just my company, but me. You're brilliant, resilient, and the most incredible woman I've ever known. I want to build a future with you, not just in business, but in everything. Will you marry me?" He opened the box, revealing a diamond ring so brilliant it seemed to capture every light in the room. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Jonathan," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes. Yes." The restaurant erupted in applause, glasses clinking, strangers smiling. Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, her laughter mingling with his. The diamond caught the light, a beacon of her new beginning. Mark watched, his world collapsing. The ring's sparkle was a blade, cutting through the last of his defenses. He'd lost her, not just to another man, but to a life he could never have given her. His hands shook as he set down his glass, the whiskey untouched. He wanted to run, to disappear, but his legs wouldn't move. Eleanor's joyous "yes" echoed in his ears, a sound that lifted her to the heavens and plunged him into despair. The music crescendos, a shot of Eleanor and Jonathan embracing, the diamond glinting. Mark's face is a mask of devastation, his eyes glistening. Voiceover, her triumph was complete, but his humiliation wasn't over. Tense, biting music. Serena struts into the restaurant, her new partner on her arm, her smile smug. She approaches Mark's table, her voice dripping with disdain. The crowd murmurs, watching his public downfall. Voiceover, the past wasn't done with him, and it had one last sting. As if the universe hadn't dealt Mark enough blows, the restaurant doors swung open, and Serena Caldwell entered. She was a vision in a crimson dress, her arm linked with a silver-haired billionaire, her new conquest. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the commotion around Eleanor and Jonathan. Then she spotted Mark, alone and broken at his table, his face a portrait of defeat. A cruel smile curved her lips. She whispered something to her partner, then sauntered over to Mark's table, her heels clicking like a predator's claws. The crowd's attention shifted, sensing drama. "Well, well," Serena purred, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Look what the cat dragged in. Still moping, Mark? I told you, you were just a stepping stone." Mark's jaw tightened, his voice low. "Leave me alone, Serena." She laughed, sharp and cutting. "Oh, darling, you made it so easy. You thought you could trade up with me? Please. Some men just don't know how to keep a real woman, do they?" She glanced at Eleanor's table, her smile venomous. "Looks like she figured it out, though. Pity you didn't." Her partner chuckled, and the nearby diners whispered, their eyes on Mark. Humiliation burned through him, hotter than any regret. He stood, his chair scraping loudly, and stormed out, Serena's laughter trailing him like a curse. The night air hit him like a slap, but it couldn't cool the shame searing his chest. The music turns dark, a shot of Mark stumbling into the street, Serena's laughter echoing. Voiceover, his world was ashes, and he had no one to blame but himself. Somber, haunting music. Mark sits alone in his dim penthouse, head in hands. Flashbacks flicker, Eleanor's support, their divorce, Serena's betrayal. His face crumples as realization dawns. Voiceover, he chased a mirage, and lost what was real. Mark wandered the city that night, oblivious to the neon lights and bustling crowds. His penthouse, once a symbol of his success, was now a hollow shell, its marble floors cold under his feet. He sank onto the couch, a half-empty whiskey bottle on the table. Flashbacks haunted him, Eleanor's late-night spreadsheets, her quiet encouragement, the divorce papers he'd thrust at her without a second thought. Then Serena's promises, her betrayal, her final, public humiliation. He'd chased glitter, thinking it was gold. Eleanor's loyalty, her love, had been the foundation of his success, and he'd thrown it away for a fleeting fantasy. Now, Innovate Tech was on the brink of bankruptcy, its stock worthless, its clients gone. Serena had taken what was left of his fortune, and his reputation was in tatters. He picked up his phone, scrolling through old texts from Eleanor. "I believe in you, Mark. We're in this together. The words mocked him now. He'd traded a partner who'd given everything for a woman who'd taken everything. The diamond on Eleanor's finger wasn't just a symbol of her new life. It was a monument to his failure, a glittering reminder of the treasure he'd lost. "I did this," he whispered to the empty room, his voice breaking. "I ruined everything." The music fades to a single, mournful note. A shot of Mark staring out his window, a silhouette of regret. Voiceover. He was alone, but her story was far from over. Uplifting, hopeful music swells. A montage of Eleanor and Jonathan's intimate wedding, her in a flowing gown, him beaming with love. Headlines flash, Eleanor Harper, the powerhouse behind Blake Industries. A final shot of Mark, alone, fading into obscurity. Voiceover, her triumph wasn't revenge, it was rebirth. Eleanor and Jonathan's wedding was a celebration of love and partnership, held in a sunlit garden with only their closest friends and family. Eleanor's gown was simple yet elegant, her smile radiant as she walked toward Jonathan. Their vows were heartfelt, promising mutual respect and unwavering support. "I promise to stand by you, to challenge you, and to love you fiercely," Jonathan said, his voice steady. Eleanor's eyes glistened. "And I promise to build with you, to dream with you, and to never let you forget your worth." The guests cheered, Lila wiping tears as she watched her friend shine. Eleanor wasn't just a bride, she was a woman reborn, her journey from betrayal to triumph complete. At Blake Industries, she continued to innovate, her strategies shaping the tech world. Articles called her a visionary, her story inspiring countless women to reclaim their power. Mark, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Innovate Tech folded, its assets sold to pay debts. He moved to a small apartment, his name a cautionary tale in tech circles. He avoided industry events, unable to face the whispers of his failure, or Eleanor's success. Eleanor's triumph wasn't about revenge, it was about rediscovery. She'd rebuilt herself, not to prove Mark wrong, but to prove herself right. Her life with Jonathan was a testament to resilience, love, and the power of second chances. As she and Jonathan walked hand in hand into their future, the world saw her not as a victim, but as a queen who'd claimed her throne. The music soars, a final shot of Eleanor and Jonathan laughing under a starry sky, their future bright. Mark's silhouette fades to black. Voiceover. Sometimes, the greatest ending is a new, magnificent beginning. The end.